A while back here on CGQ Plus, somebody asked me why my Genesis games are in a weird order. So are they in a weird order? Let's take a look.
CGQ Plus.
Alright, so way back on the very first episode of CGQ Plus, like actually the announcement episode, I got a question/comment from a guy called Whatsonmyshelf asking me why my Genesis games are in an atypical order. And I answered him in the comments, but when I saw his question, I thought I could use that as an excuse to make like a video response or whatever that would be, I talked a while back about, I would never do like a game room tour video, but that maybe I would do like a piecemeal thing, looking at some of my different sub-libraries or whatever of games. So we're going to use Whatsonmyshelf's question as an excuse to take a look at my Genesis stuff. So we'll start with the games here on the shelf, because that'll answer his question, and then move on to some of the other loose games and books that I have, and we'll wrap up by taking a look at my Genesis hardware. Okay, so here we are in front of the shelf in question. I've just got my camera sitting on a tripod, and I'm way over here. And so you can see the Genesis games here that Whatsonmyshelf said were in atypical order, which I would certainly agree with, because normally people put their video games in alphabetical order, which is exactly what I've done with a lot of my games, but not with the Genesis games. So to make it more clear what order they're in, I'm going to put up some visual aids real fast. Okay, so now with these aids there, it should hopefully be more obvious what order I have my games in, which really makes sense considering what Classic Gaming Quarterly is all about. So these games are in chronological order of release. So starting over here on the left, we have the 6 launch titles: Altered Beast, Last Battle, Space Harrier 2, Super Thunderblade, Thunder Force 2, and Tommy Lasorda Baseball. And then I do have a handful of the 1989 releases, starting with 1989 post-launch releases, starting with World Championship Soccer, which I don't even really know why I have it. It's not that great of a game. I just already had it, so I threw it up here. Ghouls and Ghosts, which was sort of the first blockbuster, I would say, post-launch release. Arnold Palmer Tournament Golf is next to that, which I think is a pretty good golf game. Forgotten Worlds is actually a game that I bought because of the Genesis in 1989 episode. Like I had to play this game obviously for the episode, and I ended up just really liking it, especially using the arcade stick, and so I bought a copy. And then next to that we have Revenge of Shinobi, which as I mentioned in that episode, I'm really not 100% sure when this game came out. It was either in very late December, meaning like after Christmas and before New Year's, 1989, or very, very early 1990, like literally January 1st or 2nd. But I was not able to find an exact date for it. Now, just to be clear, most of the release dates that I have are based on searching old Usenet posts and basically looking for people who just state, this game came out today, I saw it at the store, or people who worked at an electronics boutique and said, we just got this game in the store yesterday or whatever, rather than just relying on Wikipedia or GameFAQs or anything. Not that I think GameFAQs in general does a pretty good job, but there is still some wrong information on there. SegaRetro.org is also a pretty good resource. So the first game that I know for sure came out in early January of 1990 is the awesome Truxton. Of course, the official video game of Classic Game Room. And then Golden Axe was another January release. And I think I actually have more 1990 games than anything else, looking at it now. Here's Alex Kidd, Phantasy Star 2, Herzog Zwei, Ghostbusters, Super Monaco GP, Cyberball Columns. Michael Jackson's Moonwalker, which, as you guys saw in an earlier episode, is one of my newer additions to the library here. James Buster Douglas Knockout Boxing. I don't know if I ever told the story about this, but this was basically the first celebrity endorsement signing that Sega of America did that really didn't go well for them. All the previous ones were fine, like Arnold Palmer's Tournament Golf, but this one didn't really go so well. They signed him after he had knocked out Mike Tyson, but by the time this game actually came out, he had already been defeated. So a little bit of the luster came off of Buster Douglas there. Next to that is another celebrity endorsed game, that's Pat Riley Basketball. Not really very good game. Here is Castle of Illusion starring Mickey Mouse. That one's pretty awesome. And then the last game that I have for 1990 is Strider, which is a game that I really don't like that much, but it's a game that my friend had when we were teenagers, and so I kind of played it a lot. So it's just got a little bit of sentimental value for me, which is why I have that one. Then we get into 1991. Here, the first game we have is Joe Montana Football, which Sega paid to have developed in time for the 1990 Christmas season, and then it didn't end up making it out for that. So that didn't really go very well for them. Now, I privately interviewed Al Nilsson in preparation for the Sega Genesis launch episode, and he actually told me the story of him meeting Joe Montana in like the VIP lounge of an airport in order to pitch him the idea of doing this endorsement. Like, he was working on Joe Montana for a while, and finally Joe said, fine, come meet me here and you can give me your pitch. So that was a cool story. And then here we jump all the way from January to June here with the release of the original Sonic the Hedgehog, which was the reason that I got a Genesis in the first place. So one of my favorite, if not my favorite, ultimate favorite Genesis game. Next, here's Phantasy Star 3. There's the first Streets of Rage, Shining in the Darkness. Jewel Master is kind of a, if you'll pardon the pun, a hidden gem on the system. Not like a super great game, but really not bad. Certainly not bad as a rental type game, I think. In fact, I remember the first time I played this game, I just remember thinking, like, this would be the perfect weekend rental. And it actually had given me an idea. I wanted to start like a series on my website, and I was going to call it Weekend Rental, which I think is sort of why that term ended up finding its way into Classic Gaming Quarterly, into the videos, and why I use it so often. Next to that is Mercs. This is the first release that I have from 1992. I bought this copy of Mercs. I don't know if the sticker is in here. No. I bought this copy of Mercs at Game Dude down in LA. Game Dude is like one of the oldest video game stores probably on the West Coast. Like, Game Dude was around during the 16-bit era, and they're still around today. Here's Golden Axe 2. I personally always preferred the original Golden Axe, but Golden Axe 2 is pretty good. Then we have Kid Chameleon. People call Kid Chameleon a Super Mario Brothers ripoff. I don't really think that's fair. I think it's a good game in its own right. And then lastly over here we have Sports Talk Baseball, which may be not obvious to some people that this is actually the sequel to Tommy Lasorda Baseball. This is Tommy Lasorda Baseball was Super League Baseball in Japan, and this was just like Super League Baseball 2, but it wasn't called that. It was like Super League 91, I think, was what it was called in Japan. And then moving down to the second row of games down here, Dungeons and Dragons, Warriors of the Eternal Sun, Ayrton Senna, Super Monaco GP2. I think, I kind of have this game for obvious reasons, being a huge Senna fan, but I also did rent this game back in the day, really just because Senna was on the cover. I remember renting this when I was a teenager, and I was only drawn to it because of Senna. So it kind of, I've always thought of myself as being above being influenced by licensing and advertising, but in this case it worked at least well enough for me to rent the game, not to buy it though. Next here we have Sonic the Hedgehog 2. This was one of the first, if not the first, game to have a rock-solid street date. And it was the first game, as far as I know, to have a worldwide unified launch date. This game came out on what Sega called Sonic Tuesday, which they, spelled with the numeral 2, Sonic Tuesday. And that was November 24th, 1992. Cool game. I already kind of talked about Sonic 2 on the channel. I didn't like it back then because I didn't realize that you could not have tails following you around. And so once I learned you could do that, now I like the game quite a bit better. Next to that is another one of my all-time favorite Genesis games. There's Streets of Rage 2. This was the first Streets of Rage game that I ever played. And then I went back and played 1 and 3. And this and Sonic the Hedgehog are probably the two games that I play on the Genesis most often. And I just love both of them. Next to that, we have Lightning Force, which in Japan, of course, was Thunder Force 4. I don't have Thunder Force 3, unfortunately, so I only have 2 and 4. But, this game is tough as nails. Really awesome graphics, though, and great music. Both of which I would say that the Thunder Force series was known for. Next to that is Ecco the Dolphin. I never had Ecco the Dolphin as a teenager. I don't think I ever even rented it, but I had a buddy that had it. He bought the Genesis 2, his parents bought him the Genesis 2 when that came out, and then they got Ecco the Dolphin. He had like a little sister, and so I think that his parents probably bought it more with the sister in mind. But I remember they had Sonic 2, and they had Ecco the Dolphin. Next to that is Cheeky Cheeky Boys. This is a game that I found 5 or 6 years ago at a retro gaming store in like a bin that had games that they didn't think were worth anything or whatever, like the bargain bin basically, because of course they had all the good games in a glass case or at least on the shelf. And then I happened to glance into this bargain bin and I saw Cheeky Cheeky Boys, which, to be honest, I had never heard of this game. But just flipping it over and looking at the screenshots, I just thought, this game looks pretty neat, a sort of cartoony action platformer. And so I bought it for, I want to say, probably around $3. And I'm really glad that I did because it's a really cool game. Next to that, we have Shining Force. And one thing I wanted to point out, and I should have said it earlier, is that for years and years, I've been fascinated by Genesis spine art, which probably sounds a little bit random, but it never escaped my notice that there were these subtle differences with the games, like as far as like how big is the Genesis logo here, and then look how here the Genesis logo is much bigger, and then like here you have a smaller Genesis logo and a UPC code. And I always wondered about that, and wondered if that was a clue to the chronological order of the Genesis, but then it always kind of threw me for a loop that you had this chunk here that had the larger logos. And I can only think that this was probably something they experimented with and then just decided that it was too big. I'd actually like to ask Alan Nilsson about that if I get a chance to talk to him again. But the reason I'm bringing that up is that Shining Force is the last game that I have, and maybe the last game period, that came out with the classic, black and gray grid pattern that Sega used for Genesis games. And after that, they switched to this red. And I don't know why exactly they went with red, if maybe they just thought that it would be more noticeable. But the one thing that happened when they did this is that they went to like a unified box art style that was not just for Sega published games, but they wanted everybody's games to have this unified box art style, probably because that's what Nintendo did with the Super Nintendo. So like all of these games up to here are Sega games, like Sega published games, not necessarily programmed by Sega. In fact, many of these games are arcade ports of other companies' games, but they were all published by Sega, whereas most of my third-party published games we'll get to in a minute. But once they switched to this red unified box art style, they you'll see that there are several third-party published games that are in here. And that starts with Jurassic Park, which I know matter-of-factly is the first Genesis game to have this red package style. And that came out in early August of 1993. Shining Force came out in July of '93, so that's why I say I know for sure that Jurassic Park is the first red box Genesis game. I can't say matter-of-factly that Shining Force was the last, although I did do some research reading on Usenet, trying to find other games that were released around that time, and I didn't find anything conclusive that would say that there were any other games released between these two. Then here we have Splatterhouse 3, which I only mention this because Splatterhouse 3 is probably one of the last, if not the last really good thrift store find that I've had. I found this a few years ago at a thrift store. It's missing the manual, if that makes anybody feel any better. But I found this at a thrift store. It was not only the only Genesis game they had, I think it might have been the only video game in the store, and they wanted 50 cents for it. And I'm not really too sure what Splatterhouse 3's current going rate is, but I know it's a lot more than 50 cents. Plus, I just really love the Splatterhouse games. You know, I have Splatterhouse 1 for the TurboGrafx, then I have this one. I don't have Splatterhouse 2, unfortunately. Then next year we have Gunstar Heroes, which came out in September of '93. Before I did all this and put these in order, I always thought that Gunstar Heroes was a later release on the Genesis. I mean, 1993 is a little bit later, but I always thought it was more of a '94 release, so I was surprised that it was so early. Next to that, you have Shinobi 3. Here you have Gauntlet 4, which is a pretty underrated Genesis game in my opinion. It's got cool music, but it's also just Gauntlet, and who doesn't like Gauntlet? And then next to that is Sonic Spinball, which has a little bit of a cool story behind it. Sonic Spinball came out on November 23rd, 1993, and you might think, well, boy, that's awfully specific. But much as Sega had done in 1992 with Sonic Tuesday, in 1993, they had what they called Sonic Mania Day. And that was, as I said, November 23rd, 1993. And on that day, Sonic Spinball, Sonic CD, and Sonic Chaos for the Game Gear were all released on the same day. So that was kind of cool, I guess. Next, we have Pirates Gold, which came out in December of '93. So that's the last 1993 release that I have. And then the first '94 release I have here is Sonic the Hedgehog 3, which came out on, I think the official release date is February 3rd, 1994, but it actually was in stores in some parts of the country on February 2nd. Then we have Castlevania Bloodlines. Now, unfortunately, I have the Majesco re-release of Bloodlines, so it's this stupid cardboard box. You know, at one point I tried to, like, you know, quote-unquote upgrade my copy to an original clamshell, but it was just more money than I really felt like spending. I mean, I have the game, so, you know, what's the difference, really? Next to that is Shadowrun, Star Trek The Next Generation, which I haven't really actually spent any time playing this game just because I think I would really have to set some time aside for this one, but it's just cool to have because around the same time I was really a huge Star Trek The Next Generation fan. That was probably my favorite TV show when I was a teenager. Next to that is Virtua Racing, which is another game with kind of an interesting history to it. Virtua Racing came out, of course, in Japan before everywhere else, but then it actually came out in Europe next in the early spring of 1994, and then came out in Canada in early May of '94, and then came out in the United States in late May of '94. So for once, we got the game last, basically, although I don't know when the game came out in, like, Australia, because it seems like Australians are always getting screwed when it comes to that kind of stuff. Oddly enough, Streets of Rage 3, I can't really nail down a very good release date for it. It either came out in June or July of 1994, but for all the talk about this game on Usenet, there aren't any posts I can find from right when it came out saying, like, hey, Streets of Rage is out. There's a lot of posts saying, you know, where is it? When is it going to come out? And then, like, a month later, there are posts saying, like, hey, does anybody have any cheat codes for this game? That was a common thing that people talked about on Usenet, was asking for cheat codes. Because, of course, that was before the internet. So you either had video game magazines, your friends at school, or if you were lucky enough to have internet access in the early to mid 90s, you could hop on Usenet and see if anybody had any cheat codes there. Next we have Comic Zone. Here's another, I guess this is a Majesco release because again it's in a cardboard box. I don't have the CD that came with it, unfortunately. I just have the game. It's kind of a cool game. It's not perfect. It's a flawed game, but it's just fun. It's a beat 'em up game, but it's like it takes place inside of a comic book for anybody that has never played it. It even says here the first truly interactive comic book, which I mean that's what they were going for, and they did a pretty decent job. I just think that the gameplay itself is not great. And then we have Contra Hardcore. That one came out in late August of '94, and again, if you go on Usenet, there are tons of people asking for cheat codes on there. And then the only 1995 release that I have is Phantasy Star 4, which I've had this game for a long time. I got this game probably in, I don't know, 2004, 2005. And once again, this was a game where I went into a Goodwill, and this was like the only video game in the store. It was in a glass case, but just with a bunch of other crap. And then I don't know if you'll be able to read that or not, but right there, written on the box, unfortunately, in Sharpie pen, it says 50 cents. And again, I don't know how much this game goes for. I don't know if this one's worth less because it's a cardboard box version. I don't really care. I mean, I'm not... The value of my games is like the last thing that I'm worried about when it comes to my video games, so I really have no idea. But so that explains the order of all of these games for what's on my shelf, although like I said, I already answered his question really. And then we get into some games that are not in any particular order. Over here we've got some of my other earlier, like pre-Redbox third-party games. I don't know if it helps if I turn the camera a little bit there. Sorry about bumping it. So here we've got a few shooter games. I've got Steel Empire here, which is like a sort of a steampunk-inspired side-scrolling shooter. It's pretty neat. Next to that is Fire Shark, who I want to say this is a Toaplan game, but yeah, good. Okay, I'm not stupid. Toaplan shooter. This one has sort of a World War II vibe to it. It's a pretty cool game. It's maybe a little bit too easy because you can really get power-ups in this game that are just like ridiculously powerful so that you can just constantly kill everything on the screen. But it's still a neat game nonetheless. Next to that is Phelios, and this is like an ancient Greek or ancient Roman, I always get them confused, shooter game. So it's kind of reminiscent of, well, I wanted to say Dragon Spirit, but that's wrong. There's a game on the Nintendo that's similar to this, and the name just flew out of my head. I got this game when I got my replacement Genesis, I guess you would call it. I'll tell that story in a minute when we get to my Genesis hardware, but this game came with that, and so just for that reason I have sort of a soft spot for it. And then lastly, I have, lastly meaning of my little shooter sub-collection here, I have Insector X, which Insector X I got from a coworker of my wife, because, and again, I probably got this in maybe like 2005. She mentioned to somebody at work that her husband was into old video games, and he showed up a few days later with a stack of Genesis games saying, hey, I have these and I don't really want them. And so I got this game, and I got Blockout, and I got a few others. I got a couple games I didn't keep. And I kept them for a while, but they ended up being the victim of one of my purges, I guess. But Insector X is pretty cool. You get to shoot bugs, so that's pretty neat. But you're not a bug. You're like some little dude with wings, so you're kind of bug-like, I guess. But you know, if you ever play like Cybercore on the TurboGrafx, then you are a bug, I think, shooting other bugs. But whatever. Next to that, we have Flashback: The Quest for Identity. I remember renting this game also back in the day. They called this like a CD. Oh yeah, here it is. The CD-ROM game in a cartridge. Like, I don't really know what that. I guess because it has like the cool like pre-rendered cutscenes or something. They thought that it looked more like a cartridge or more like a CD game on a cartridge. But it's definitely a cool game. Sort of similar controls to like Prince of Persia or something like that. But it's neat anyway. Next to that is Batman, which, I mean, I think I've told this story already a couple of times. You know, Batman came out on the Mega Drive in Japan, but was not released here because of the whole deal with Sunsoft releasing the Batman game on the Nintendo, and so people thought this game was never going to come out here, and then it finally did come out like a year later when maybe the first Batman movie wasn't really popular anymore, but they finally got the game out here. It's pretty good. I think this game is cool, but you know, if you read reviews of it, most of them are pretty lukewarm, but I think it's got some cool graphics, and as is generally the case with Sunsoft games, it has really good music. Here's Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, also for US Gold, from US Gold, so I feel like actually that should go next to Flashback, right? That makes more sense. And then here is Street Fighter II Special Champion Edition. I know a lot of people are kind of down on this version because it's maybe not as good as the Super Nintendo versions, which is probably true. But the Street Fighter II craze or whatever really started when I was in high school, which was a really cool age to be when this happened. People don't believe me when I tell this story, but we actually had a Street Fighter II cabinet at my high school for like a year until I think they took it out because people were fighting about it, like having actual fights about it. But I remember renting this game also, although I also got lucky. My buddy had a Super Nintendo, and he actually, like, I think he went out of town for a weekend, like to go on a trip with his mom, and he actually let me borrow his Super Nintendo for the whole weekend. And he had the original Street Fighter II for Super Nintendo, so I got to play that all weekend. Next, we've got this F1 game. I think it's no secret to most people I'm a big F1 fan. I got this game. I went on vacation to Ireland, like, boy, going on 3 years ago. In fact, it's almost exactly 3 years ago, actually. And, so of course I went and like hit up video game stores, but everything was just so expensive. Like, I really wanted a copy of Probotector, which is the European version of Contra for the Nintendo. And I actually found a copy of Probotector at this store, and they wanted like 80 or 90 euros for it. So I was like, forget that. And but then I saw this like in a bargain bin or something, and of course I love F1, and I picked it up, and this is so heavy because it's got this instruction manual in it that's probably in like several different languages. So that's neat. But it's just cool because, I know nobody watching this probably cares about F1, but, it's got actual F1 cars on the front with the sponsors and everything. Like, there's two Williams cars with the Canon livery. Of course, I'm a Canon guy, although I'm shooting this on a Sony camcorder right now, but usually I use Canon. And then behind that's a McLaren. Of course, they took the cigarette sponsorship off, so it doesn't have the Marlboro logos or anything. It's just the red and white. And then behind that is a Benetton, which doesn't have the camel livery on it. And then for some reason, they put a Ferrari way in the back. What the hell? So, I don't know what's up with that. And then it's kind of cool that they have all these names of drivers even on the side. Now, of course, Ayrton Senna is not in the game because there was like an exclusivity agreement with Sega for him to be in Super Monaco GP2. So he's not mentioned on here, but they have all the driver names and the track names here, and more driver names there, and then the teams down here, actual teams. It's cool because it's an official, FIA Formula One World Championship official license. So I think it's pretty neat because this game is from, it's gotta be like 1993 based on the drivers on it. And then lastly over here I have. Pier Solar, or I don't even know how to say it. Just to be completely upfront with you guys, I've never played this game. It popped up for sale on the forums. One of my buddies was selling it, and I always kind of wanted to grab it because I would like to play it at some point. And so it was just sort of a purchase of opportunity. So I bought it, but I've never had a chance to play it. I just really don't have time to play role-playing games right now, between just work and having 2 YouTube channels. I kind of look at all my role-playing games as like my retirement plan. Because, when I'm old, I'll have plenty of free time, and you don't need to have, like, good manual dexterity to play a role-playing game, right? Like, I'm not going to be able to play shooter games when I'm, like, 65 years old, but I can play role-playing games. So as long as my carts haven't all rotted to death by then, I can still play them. And then just lastly, randomly, I have this Sword of Vermilion hint book. Even though I don't have Sword of Vermilion, although I'd like to pick it up. I got this. I went to a yard sale one time and got a few Genesis games, and this was in with the Genesis games, but he didn't have the game. But he was trying to sell everything, so I just took it. But I keep it because, you know, maybe it'll get sort of vermilion at some point. And then I'm going to have to move the camera a little bit here in order to kind of get into the next bit of stuff, so I apologize for the camera movement. All right, sorry, that's the best I can do. That's as low as my camcorder goes. And obviously, I'm not going to spend too much time on this because we're talking about sports games, but this is the Genesis sports section here. And just a few noteworthy things. Here's the original John Madden football, which, you know, came in a cardboard box, as did several of the very early Electronic Arts releases. It doesn't slide out like some of these do. You actually have to open the flap and take it out. But you know, certainly not a perfect game, but I really enjoy the original John Madden football. And I mean, this is the game that started it all, right? I mean, this franchise is still around to this day, so it's pretty cool to have that. I have the first 4 Madden games. I'm not going to pull them all out because what for? 92, 93, 94. I don't know why I have all of those, to be honest, really. I mean, people say, some people, like well, I shouldn't say people. My friend says 93 is the best. I think most people think that 94 is the best. And then I've got 4 of the 5 PGA Tour games, just because I think those games are really good. I'm really not into golf. Like, I don't play golf. I don't watch golf on TV generally. But I just get a kick out of golf video games. And these PGA Tour golf games are really good, with the exception of PGA Tour 96, which is why I don't have that one. PGA European Tour uses the engine of PGA Tour 2, but just has like European players, and then has European golf courses. But other than that, it's the same engine. So, although all 3 games work basically, they're all like 3-click, whatever. And then up here, I've got Winter Olympics from US Gold again, so the same company that made like Flashback. And I remember buying this. I found this in an EB Games, maybe in like 2004, 2005. And it just stuck out to me because it has the Mega Drive logo instead of the Genesis logo. And it says, you know, play on Genesis and Mega Drive. I don't know. The cart does not appear to be shaped any differently. You know, Mega Drive cartridges are shaped a little bit differently, but I guess this will fit in both. I've never actually owned a Mega Drive, so I don't know what the differences are, like the subtle differences in the cartridge slot shape. And then, of course, everybody has to have a copy of NHL 94, so I do too. And then I have NHL 97, just sort of for nostalgic reasons. NHL 97 was the last Genesis game that I ever bought, sort of while the Genesis was still at least semi-current, right? I mean, this game came out in, I guess, late 96. And I bought it in the summer of 97. I actually bought NHL 97, and then like 2 weeks later, I think, I went and bought a PlayStation. And then I bought NHL 97 for the PlayStation too, so I had both. And then the last sports game I have here is just NBA Live 95, which, in my opinion, and obviously I'm a retro guy or whatever, like I prefer old video games, vastly prefer old video games. Live 95 is, in my opinion, the best basketball game ever made. At least semi-realistic basketball game. I mean, I'm not going to compare it to like NBA Jam and stuff like that, because those are just good in a different way. But the 16-bit era for me those are the best sports games, because you know, they were licensed and were sort of semi-realistic, but they were still simple. And sports games today have just gotten way too complicated for an old guy like me. Okay, so then continuing on over here, we have my Electronic Arts games that are not sports games. So, like, I have Road Rash here, which, you know I said on a video I didn't really care for Road Rash, and of course that made everybody mad. But I don't hate it. I think it's a little bit overrated, and I only even say that just because I think that the Genesis hardware isn't really able to get the job done well enough. Like, if you play Road Rash on like the PlayStation or the 3DO, those games are awesome. I did want to mention, actually, talking about Electronic Arts, they never hopped on board with this whole red box stuff. They always had their own box art, and they kind of already had their own unified style. Although you can see, like, later with the sports games, they went with these white boxes, but they kept making their non-sports games with sort of these two-tone kind of deals, and you know, all Electronic Arts games look pretty similar. There are a few late in the Genesis life where they no longer look like that, but for the most part they do. Here is Buck Rogers' Countdown to Doomsday. This is one of my absolute favorite Genesis games. It's an American-style role-playing game. You can see it's made by SSI. So it's like loosely based on Dungeons and Dragons rules. I've never been a Dungeons and Dragons guy. I've never actually played a game of like tabletop Dungeons and Dragons, but this is a really cool game. It really has nothing to do with Buck Rogers. I don't know why they even call it that. The character Buck Rogers makes like a cameo appearance in the game just to say like, hey, you guys are doing a good job. But other than that, I mean, it's just an RPG set in space. And I had this game when I was a teenager. I found this game like in a video store, you know, like in a bin of like previously played games that I guess nobody was renting anymore. And I really liked it. Same exact story with Starflight. This is another game that I picked up, I think, like previously played at a video store. And it even came with all the stuff when I got it. You would think that the manual and the star map wouldn't have come with it, but they did. And also a really cool game. If you like Star Control 2 for the PC, Starflight has a similar vibe. So I like that game quite a bit. I only have Zany Golf because Zany Golf is another one of these cardboard box Electronic Arts games, and it was one of the very first EA games for the Genesis. It's just supposed to be like a mini golf game. It's not like it's a great game. I just have it for sort of historical reasons, if you will. And then, I guess we don't really need these anymore, right? And then over here we get into ballistic / accolade games, which I talked about in one of the Let's Reads. I don't even remember which one. Turrican was a game that I sort of had when I was a teenager. A buddy of mine had this game, and he hated it so much that he basically let me borrow it and just never asked for it back. And I think maybe eventually I had to give it back to him because this is not the original copy of Turrican from back then. But I've always liked Turrican. I agree that it's hard, but it's just got a different style of gameplay than I think than Americans are used to. This is not like a run and gun so much as, you know, you have to play it with a little bit of care. And one thing I wanted to show that was cool, because I don't know if people get to see this kind of stuff very often. So if you open it, aside from the cartridge and the manual, there's these cool cards that come with it. And these are perforated so that, I mean, in theory, you could rip them. Well, I don't know why you'd want to. And each one is just the cover art for one of the games that they have out. And on the back are some notes on the games, like here's the story, some design notes, special features, and tips, just to try to get you to buy more Accolade games. As I said in that Let's Read when I was talking about Ballistic, it's still not clear to me why Accolade created this other company to release games on the Genesis, because Accolade was not a game, or not a company that was really releasing games on the Nintendo. So it doesn't seem like it was because they were trying to get around Nintendo's BS rules. And then down here's the original Star Control, Super Off-Road, Double Dragon, and Hardball 3. I don't have the original Hardball, I wish I did. And then here I just have an in-the-box Sega Genesis controller, which I got, again, when I bought my Genesis and I got Felios. That's when I got this Genesis controller. And then over here, just because it's Sega related and it's not going to get its own video, I'll just show you my Sega Master System stuff real fast. Here are the two pack-in cartridges. I had to buy both of these when I was making the Master System launch video, just because I wanted to have them to show in the video. You know, obviously I can just play the games on an EverDrive, but you know, I wanted to be able to have these to take pictures of and whatnot, so I ended up having to buy both of these. So, I mean, that's the kind of stuff, you know, when you have a YouTube channel and you're trying to make videos, You know, like, yes, the channel makes money through AdSense, but a lot of that money, well, all that money goes out the door just to buy other stuff for the channel. And so it's stuff like this that people don't think about. Like, I didn't have these, so I had to buy them. Not complaining, I'm just sort of stating facts. I feel very fortunate to have a YouTube channel that is successful enough that it will buy this kind of stuff for me. So I am not complaining in any way. Here's World Grand Prix. That was another launch game, as was Choplifter. Here I have Outrun. I don't have Outrun for the Genesis, unfortunately, but I do have Outrun for the Master System. Cool game. Next to that is Roston. Here is Shinobi, which I'm not the hugest fan of Shinobi, but I prefer Revenge of Shinobi. But it's still a cool game, and it's one of the must-have games for the Master System, in my opinion. Here is Phantasy Star, which my buddy Tino gave me this game. So Tino doesn't watch my show, I don't think. But if he ever does, thanks, Tino. Over here we've got Lord of the Sword. Here's the original Thunderblade, you know, which is the Super Thunderblade was one of the Genesis launch titles, and this is the original Thunderblade. Over here, I don't even know why I have this game. I have Great Golf. Not really great. Not horrible, but pretty close to horrible. And then I have two Sega card games, Super Tennis and F-16 Fighting Falcon. I'm sorry. And yeah, neither one of them is really noteworthy. I just thought it was cool to have a couple of these card games. I think I might have needed one to show. I don't remember if I showed one of these on the show, actually. I don't think I did. But whatever. And then right down here below it, I don't know why I'm even showing this, just because I think it's cool, though. Because I had to buy this for the Sega Master System launch video as well. I've got this Power Base Mini FM that I got from Stone Age Gamer. And basically what that is, it's just a Power Base converter stuck inside of a cartridge that is set up like an adapter. So you can use this as a Power Base converter to play Master System games on your Genesis, but this also has that Yamaha FM sound chip built into it so that you can have that FM sound on Master System games that are compatible with it without having to like modify your Master System. I don't remember how much this cost, but like I said, I just bought it because I needed it for the show, so whatever. And then lastly, while we're over here, I'll just show you guys my Sega CD games, just because once again, I don't think that's going to get a separate video. So now I'm just going to have to take the camera off the tripod and just hand hold it. So I apologize if the video is a little bit shaky. So down here, these are just my complete in the box, or complete in the case, I guess you would say, Sega CD games. Not too much that's particularly noteworthy, in my opinion. There's Pitfall: The Mine Adventure. It's a pretty cool game, I think. Here's the CD version of NHL 94, which, like I said in the NHL 94 video, is, in my opinion, the best version of NHL 94. If you already happen... Oh my god, that's dusty. Sorry, there's a spider web down here. If you happen to already have a Sega CD, then you might as well get that. There's Ecco the Dolphin, which is the exact same as the game on the Genesis, but with CD quality sound. Sonic CD, Popful Mail. That's probably the most expensive Sega CD game that I have, but I just like Popful Mail. That I did not find that in a thrift store. Like that I had to just pay for. But it was the same kind of thing where somebody was selling it on the forums, and I was just like, I'll take it. I got Android Assault here. Android Assault I might have gotten at a thrift store, actually, now that I think about it. It's kind of a cool shooter. Rise of the Dragon, Wing Commander. Soulstar, this game is just kind of funny. So I got Soulstar at a thrift store for $3. And I didn't really know anything about it, and I had it just kind of sitting, you know, in a box somewhere, just because I don't think I was even planning on keeping it. And then I was actually on a Sunday night live stream with the My Life in Gaming guys, and Corey was telling a story about how Tri had found a Sega CD system, I think, and it had that game in it, and he was all lucky because, oh, that game is pretty expensive and pretty rare. And I was like, oh, really? I had no idea. So I just thought that was kind of funny. And so for that reason, I put it back on the shelf. Like, oh, well, if the game is cool, then I should put it on the shelf. So anyway, that does it for the Genesis shelf. Sorry, now we're way too close. So now we're going to move on to some loose games and game books, and then we'll wrap up by taking a look at my 8 and 16-bit Genesis, or 8 and 16-bit Sega hardware. Okay, so now we are over on my video game shelf, my other video game shelf, where I was showing off some of my Nintendo stuff several episodes ago on CGQ+. I apologize, I know the lighting is starting to get suboptimal, starting to get a little bit late in the afternoon. So I'll try to do what I can to brighten things up when I'm editing. So over here, so this is like my loose Genesis cartridge drawer. I got this thing several years ago, probably like 2004, 2005. I feel like anything cool I have, I got in like the mid-2000s at thrift stores. This came from the Salvation Army. And just first real quick on top, just to show some of that cool stuff. Well, I've had this rubber hand since I was a kid. When I was a kid, Halloween was like my favorite. Well, Halloween and Christmas, I guess, were my two favorite holidays. And so I used to spend all my money on Halloween crap like every October. And I just happened to still have this rubber hand. And so I just kind of keep it around just because it reminds me of Halloween when I was a kid. This stuff is not Sega related, so I'll move that. And then back here I have, like I said, Sonic the Hedgehog is one of my favorite Genesis games. So I just have the two Mega Drive versions. Here is the Japanese Mega Drive version, and then there's the European Mega Drive version. That one, I've never been to Japan. I just got that on eBay. I just put in a really low bid on an auction and just happened to win. That I actually got in the UK when I went there on vacation one time. That was like, I think, one of the only, if not the only video game that I bought on that trip. And then I have a couple of cool cartridges here. I think the Video Game Historian just did an episode on the Blockbuster Game Factory cartridges. Here I have the blue one. Unfortunately, it doesn't have anything on it. I got this cartridge at the Classic Gaming Expo in 2005. I traded some kid a huge stack of common Atari games, like Atari 2600 games, for this. So to me, I was trading basically what was garbage for something that was at least kind of neat. And then over here I have, unfortunately, maybe you can see that the label is kind of moldy, which is sort of disgusting, but that is a Toy Story like promo cartridge. It's not, people sometimes erroneously call these prototype cartridges. It's really not. It's maybe a pre-release cartridge. It's very heavy because it has EEPROMs in it instead of just normal ROMs. I did open the cartridge and look, it's got a bunch of EEPROMs in it. And then it's just got this paper label that was probably sitting in somebody's garage or something, and that's probably how it got moldy. But best I can tell, it just has the retail version or the final build of Toy Story on it, so it's not like there's anything really particularly cool about it. But I got this at a flea market in like 2005 for like $2 or something, so I thought that was kind of cool. And then we'll open the drawer here. Hopefully it doesn't come crashing down. And then we'll see if we can just angle the camera down a little bit there. I'll just have to hold it with one hand. But back here I've got Virtua Racing for the 32X. I'll try to just show like the noteworthy games. Like here's Toe Jam and Earl. Unfortunately, I don't have a complete copy of that. I have Shinobi. Well, it's Shadow Dancer, The Secret of Shinobi. I was going to say that would be like Shinobi 2, but really Revenge of Shinobi is Shinobi 2, and this should be Shinobi 3. And then why isn't what they call Shinobi 3 Shinobi 4? It doesn't really make sense, but anyway, they're Shadow Dancer. I've got some loose Master System games in here. Fantasy Zone and Rocky, that's not particularly noteworthy. Chakan the Forever Man. I have all three of the Valise games in here, but they're all in like, well, this one's not in bad condition at all, actually. It just has the little wear on the label there. But I was going to say they're all in gamer condition, but really that's the only one that's really bad. Here's Sid of Valise, which certainly appears to be an ex-rental, as does the original. Well, the original Valise here is definitely an ex-rental from Blockbuster. I got Sunset Riders. That's definitely a cool game. Sonic Classic, Bonanza Brothers. Got a Sega CD RAM backup cart, which I bought this, and then the Mega EverDrive came out right after that, and so then like I don't need this anymore. So that's kind of a bummer. I've got my Sonic and Knuckles cartridge in here. Here's Blockout. This is what I was saying. This was one of the games I got for free from my wife's coworker. So my point was that, the more people that you tell you're into video games, the better, because most people aren't, and maybe they'll give you stuff. And then here's my copy of Castlevania Bloodlines. I don't actually keep it in the box, just because that way I can take it out whenever I want. And then here's Crew Ball, which was, of course, the EA pinball game that was like Motley Crue themed, so it's got all the digitized Motley Crue music. And then the only other thing I'd say that's really noteworthy in here is I have a Genesis Honeybee converter, which I didn't really even know that these were a thing until I found this one for sale. When I think of Honeybee converters, I think of the Famicom converters. So that is it for loose games. And then up here, I've got some books. And we'll just go through those really quickly. This, I think, is just it's just a Dungeons and Dragons hint book. That's not really anything special. But I've got, Game Genie codes. Oh, here, this is kind of cool. So here is the book that comes with the Game Genie. And then I've also got a whole pile of these Game Genie code updates, which you could basically register to get these when you bought a Game Genie. So you would receive these in the mail, and they would just have new codes in them. So that's kind of cool. I don't remember where I got those. I think I probably bought them from somebody off the forums, because that's not really the kind of thing you would ever expect to find in a thrift store. And then I've got a few of these types of books. The Prima old Prima guides. Here is just a Prima guide for the Sega CD. So it's just got a bunch of Sega CD things in it. It's not the greatest. These books were all in black and white. So, and the paper quality was just like normal paperback book quality. So nothing special. Next to that, I've got one of the GamePro published books, GamePro Hot Tips. This one's for sports games, which probably means that most people don't care about it. I paid $1.49 for it. I used to always look for these when I would go to the thrift stores. Although I will say, at least this is in full color. So that's pretty cool. And I'm trying to see if anything in here is not NES. Oh no, there is, because there's some Genesis stuff there. I don't know if they're... I think they're grouped by what sport they are. So this has got to be from like very early 90s, I would say. But anyway, and then I've got another GamePro book right next to it. And that is... the Sega Genesis Game Secrets Second Edition. And this one, unfortunately, is a little bit cheaper. This one's just all black and white. So that's too bad. But yeah, these are just fun to collect. Like I said, whenever I go to like thrift stores, or if you go to used bookstores, you can find stuff. Like I got this. This is the Lunar Official Strategy Guide for the Sega CD. And I got this because there's like a local used bookstore here in the small town where I live. And I walked in there and the lady was, like, well, can I help you find anything? And I just said, well, do you have any old video game books? And she came out with a few, and this was one of them. And it still has the receipt in it. I paid $11 for it, so that's kind of a lot. But I think that for a Lunar guide, I'm guessing that that's probably worth it. Although I don't really know, because I don't really get hung up on prices of things. So. And then here I've got the GamePro Street Fighter 2 strategy guide, which I don't believe this is. This is not system specific. It just says that it's got some stuff for the Super NES version and for the Arcade Champion Edition. So this probably came out after the game had been ported over to the Super Nintendo, but before Special Champion Edition came out on the Genesis. But that's just a guess on my part. And then here I've got, this is that Mega Drive book that kind of came out recently. I don't even remember what it's called. Sega Mega Drive Genesis Collected Works. So I actually ended up with 2 copies of this because one got lost in the mail temporarily, and so they were very nice and sent me another copy, and then the first copy showed up, and so I ended up giving it away on Twitter. So, but that was very nice of them to do that. I basically asked them when the second one showed up, I said, do you mind if I just give it away on Twitter? And they said, yeah, no problem. And then here I've got the EA Sports Official Power Play Guide, so it's just, a guide to some EA Sports games. You can see it's like Madden 94, NHL 94, NBA Showdown 94. So this probably came out in like late 93, since it was covering the 94. I never knew that. So Prima Publishing was up in Rockland, California. That's not far from me at all. That's in the same general area where I live. So so that's pretty cool. And then I've got 2 of the official Sega Genesis Power Tips books. I've got, I think, what is this, Volume 1 and Volume 3? Yes, I'm just missing Volume 2. Not that it's a big deal. So it's kind of cool because it has like that same grid pattern like the old Genesis games have. So that's kind of neat. And then for some reason they switched over to white. So that's it for this shelf. So now we are just going to finish up by taking a look at my Sega hardware. So see you in a second. So I mentioned that I got a replacement Genesis back in the day. And so just to tell the story really quickly, I got my Genesis in like 1992. I just got it because I wanted to play Sonic the Hedgehog. And then by 1997, I had a PlayStation. And my mom like knew somebody at work that, you know, was like a young married girl, and her husband didn't have a lot of money. And she had asked me if I had anything I'd be willing to give them. And I thought about my Genesis system. And so I ended up actually getting rid of my Genesis and all of my games by giving it to them. So I got rid of like Sonic the Hedgehog and Golden Axe and Buck Rogers, Starflight, Turrican. I can't remember if my friend took back Turrican or if I ended up giving it away. I can't remember. So, you know, at the time I felt like I was kind of done playing it. And at that time, I didn't have the attachment for it that I had for my Nintendo. So I just didn't really have a problem giving it away. So that's what I did. But, you know, within a couple of years, I kind of felt like, you know, I missed having a Genesis. And as I've said before, by the late 90s, I was getting into collecting old video games. And sorry, my room is pretty dirty in here. The CGQ offices, rather, are very dirty. Or just disheveled. But anyway, I temporarily had bought a Model 2 Genesis off of eBay back in the very early days of eBay. And, you know, but I always wanted to have a Model 1 back. And I finally got this one in probably the late spring of 2004. It was like right when I graduated from college, I bought this. And I got it on eBay. And I remember at the time my friend was making fun of me for saying I overpaid. I can't remember how much I paid for it, but it was probably like $100 or something. But as you can see, this is like a launch model Genesis. You know, it's still got altered beast rather than Sonic, which would make it, of course, just within the first couple of years, which that's not as big of a deal. But as I'll show you in a minute, it's actually a much earlier unit than just saying it that it's within the first couple of years. But just in case nobody's ever seen the back of one, here's what it looks like. The new generation in video entertainment, showing it with Altered Beast there. And then here's a bunch of screens from Altered Beast. Looks like one from each level there. And I don't know if there's anything cool on the sides. Nah, not really. Interestingly, the UPC code is gone, which actually might also give a little bit of a indication of how old the system is, because in the fall of 91, Sega was running a promotion where if you bought a Genesis, you could send away for a free game. Excuse me, the fall of 90, not 91. You could send away for a free Genesis game. And so I'm willing to bet that that is when this system is from, is 1990. So anyway, I got this. That's also when I got that in the box controller there, and that's when I got Felios. And I know I got a few other games with it. I just can't remember which games off the top of my head. And so then we're just going to come over this way and then let the camera kind of become not mad anymore. And so here is the actual Genesis. You can see I've also got a Model 1 Sega CD. I think I found that at a thrift store or something, and I think I had to fix it because there was something wrong with the drive mechanism. But once I got it fixed, it's worked fine for me ever since. I know these Model 1s have kind of a reputation for not being great reliability-wise, but I've just really never had a problem with it. It works just fine for me. I don't have like the official Sega mixing cable. This is just like a standard Radio Shack 1/8 inch to 1/8 inch stereo cable here. And then there's my Mega EverDrive. So that's like I was saying, I don't really need the Sega CD RAM backup cart anymore. And so that's the Genesis I've had since 2004. And then right about the time I started Classic Gaming Quarterly, the channel, within the first few months, I ended up getting this Genesis, which is also a Model 1. Now, this Genesis is what you call a non-TMSS Genesis. So like when you turn this Genesis on, it doesn't say like, produced by or under license from Sega. Because it's early enough that it doesn't have that. This one does, for whatever that's worth. I don't know why it matters. And then here I've got my other. That later became known as the EverDrive MD. But I was like on the pre-order list. This was the first EverDrive that ever came out, and at the time it was just called the EverDrive because there were no other EverDrive products, and so he just called them EverDrives. And the reason I bought this Genesis is I don't really ever talk about the show and how it's produced and stuff like that because nobody ever really asks. But for the first couple years, all of my gameplay footage was captured in S-Video using a DVD recorder. So I would record gameplay footage onto DVDs using S-Video, and then I would have to turn around and rip the DVD in my computer. So it was a huge pain in the butt. And of course, the Genesis doesn't output S-Video natively. And so I had the RGB output from the Genesis going into a video transcoder, encoding it into S-Video. But then somebody was selling this on the forums, and so the reason that I bought this is that it is S-Video modded. Now, obviously, I don't use that anymore because now I do all my recording in RGB, but this is still the system that I use to record footage because I ended up opening this up and doing sort of the simple modification to get rid of the jail bars in the video signal. So this doesn't do composite anymore because I cut the line going from that, or I forgot exactly what I had to do, but it's basically like the composite video line is causing video interference, and so that's why you get jail bars, and so that's been cut or lifted temporarily, whatever. And so now this has a clean video. I would like to get the Mega Amp installed in here for better audio, but I don't really have time to do that myself. It's a pretty complicated mod, at least based on my skill level. And so I'd like to just send this to somebody and have them do it, but it's just one of those things that's kind of on the list. And then over here, I don't know if it's going to be too dark in there. Well, I can just lift it up, I guess. Here I have a power base converter, which I had that before I got the power base converter that I already showed you. That also came from my friend Tino. So the same guy that gave me Phantasy Star, I think he sold me that for something like $10 many years ago. And I've always kept it. I guess just because I got it from him for next to nothing, I would never get rid of it anyway. Unless I guess it was to give it back to him if he really wanted it, although I'd rather keep it. And then I've got my Sega Master System here, and this, again, I bought this before I started recording in RGB, so this is also modified for, there it is, for S-Video, and again, I don't use that anymore. And when I bought this, it came with the Master EverDrive, so that's why I have that. Although obviously I'm glad to have it. I don't really need this for much of anything, only because I can record video using that Genesis, which has a cleaner video signal. Man, this is all dusty too. Sorry, I need the dust. That has a cleaner video signal because I did the video mod on it, and I didn't do it on this. But so yeah, I don't know why I have this actually anymore, except I just kind of like to have it. So I always wanted, as I said one time, I think on the show, I always wanted a Sega Master System when I was a kid, so it was cool to finally get one. And then just lastly over here, I've got the mushroom, or whatever people call it. I've got my 32X, which a lot of people don't like the 32X, and if I had bought a 32X, around Christmas of '94, I probably would have been upset too. But considering how cheap they are now, I think it's just kind of a fun thing to have. So anyway, I think that wraps it up for all of my Sega stuff. I did have some loose Sega CD discs that I didn't show. Sorry, because they're in a CD wallet. I just have like Final Fight and Terminator and a few other things. But But I think I showed you all the juicy stuff, and probably this video is super long, but hopefully now you get an idea for why I could never do a game room tour video, because like I said, it would just be 8 or 9 hours long, because I just like talking about this stuff. So, all right, well, hopefully that answered the question adequately, and also hopefully the rest of you guys found it interesting to take a look at my Genesis stuff. If you like this type of video, please let me know. Obviously, I have lots of other games that we can go through and take a look at. I also plan on hopefully having the next episode of Flashback up fairly soon. I've been thinking about it a lot. I just haven't set aside the time to set up the camera here and record it. So thanks as always for watching this episode of CGQ Plus, and we'll see you next time.